Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Peter Evans, Senior Business Correspondent at the Sunday Times. Thanks to everyone for joining, and thanks to the CPS for producing such an interesting and provocative report. I think it challenges some of the assumptions a lot of people have about the relationship between big tech and small business. So we'll go into that in some detail in the next hour. One thing that did strike me was how over the past 3 months, according to the SME decision makers who responded, these digital platforms have in some cases helped them survive during what's been a total economic shutout. So yeah, we'll talk about that and a lot more. One statistic that always jumps out at me whenever I read stuff on SMEs or write stuff on SMEs is that they make up 99.8% of all businesses in Britain. So we should be talking about them all the time in relation to every policy decision made when we're talking about business, but we're not in some cases. That is changing, and hopefully we can change a bit of that today, but almost every single business decision has impact on SMEs. Right, we've got a great set of panelists today and a presentation on the report. So I'll quickly introduce you and then hand over to Eamon Ives from the CPS, who will run you through some of the findings. So we have Paul Scully, the Small Business Minister, Karen Pallant, the UK Policy Manager at Facebook, Venus Ali, Director of Policy at Tech UK, and Nick King, Head of Business at CPS. We'll come to panel discussion shortly, but first off, Eamon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very flattering to have such an impressive lineup of guests here, not least the Minister, who I hope will find the following discussion interesting and useful. So as you were saying, sort of before we open up into a general discussion, I'm just going to take a few minutes sort of through the broad contours of our report. So when we first started this research, I think we were focused mainly on looking into one key economic problem, and that's the UK's productivity puzzle, particularly within smaller businesses. Now, productivity is important because it essentially means how much stuff we can produce with any given amount of resources. So the more we make, the higher our living standards will be or should be. In fact, in the long run, increasing productivity is pretty much the only real way to genuinely lift living standards. So it's critical that we keep it trundling along at least a decent pace. And sadly for the UK, that's really not been the case of late. So many of you may know that the rate of productivity growth in the UK has been pretty abysmal since the financial crash. Between 2008 and the end of the 2010s, it's grown by a measly 0.3% per annum. And that's in stark contrast to the reasonably healthy 2.3% or so in the 3 decades prior. And that represents a massive opportunity cost. In fact, if productivity had stayed on that sort of pre-crash trend, we believe that would be about 25% higher than it is today. So clearly a huge gap there. It's also worth noting how the UK productivity figures compare with other nations, which, to be blunt, is not very well. The UK does have a slightly higher than average productivity rate than the average OECD country, but we're still a long way off leading nations like Ireland, USA, France, Germany. So that was kind of where we